I think there's two sides of it. So I think I'm inspired by the tech for sure. So, and I come at it from a slightly different perspective. I was not a crypto first person. I started two companies in the legal tech space. And so I came at it with like, wow, this is the future of how we do contracts and tax and accounting and all the like, the stuff was like, this is really cool. And other people were like, yay, Bitcoin. I was like, yay, taxes. And so to me, it was pretty revolutionary in how you track things, how you audit things, how you create contracts that can be programmable and automatable. And so that's where I really came into it from. So after I did two legal tech companies, we were starting to see some of the early smart contracts deals. I was doing some angel investments. And so kind of slowly got into that way. And it like, that was probably like 2015 and like starts sucking you in slowly over time. And then you get more and more excited about it as you see all of the potential. I worked at IBM, I ran their blockchain ventures group, and then we've gone here. I think on the venture capital side, like I didn't intend to be a venture capitalist. I liked being a founder. And then, pretty quickly realized raising capital where, I was a female founder building companies with other female founders, not just a founder, we're female founder. And so pretty quickly realized that it was not a meritocratic environment. I grew up pretty poor without the connections that a lot of people in Silicon Valley have. I hustled really hard to get them. We did raise, several million in venture funding, but not nearly as much as some of our peers were doing. Time after time after time, it'd be like, we support women. I have daughters. This is a nice charity project. And we're like, yeah, that's not really what we're doing here. We're really building a business that we think can be really scalable and big. And you could just tell the tone was different. And I think that to me, and then that was before kind of Me Too and all the things that happened there. I think we've made some progress, honestly, not as much as I would like to see. And so part of the reason I got on the venture side was to invest in the companies that I liked, that I think were being not funded to the degree that they should have been. And so the first two funds I worked for were focused on diverse founders. I think I pretty quickly realized that wasn't the right platform for me, at least. I think that there's, it still kind of felt like charity and impact investing, and that's not really how we were looking at it. And so I started kind of moving to bigger platforms that didn't incorporate diversity into the brand or into the focus area, but we just did it anyway. And I thought there was a bigger impact to be had there. And of course, as you go down this decentralized kind of DAO investment DAO space, which I'm sure we'll dive into, you realize the capacity for, I will always focus on the best deal and the best teams and all of those things. But the opportunity to really give a fighting chance to founders and to investors and to people who are not necessarily part of the like entrenched ecosystems that already exist is really phenomenal, right? Of course, it's still going to be hard, but there is really an opportunity to discover and to participate in these ecosystems when it's decentralized and when there's a like global scale, for example, and a global focus and a global community. Those things just get me really excited about the changing landscape of venture and how we can support that with this type of structure.
Absolutely. And I know you and I actually met on Eve Discord, and that always amazes me how like global and quick we've gotten to connect with amazing people in totally new channels and formats that are really remarkable. And so my next question is really like, what role do you feel like you're playing in the wealth space now, and why is it important? And I'd love if we could start with just that definition of what is an investment DAO, and then now what is the role of that new structure and in wealth creation?
Yeah, so it's complicated. I guess the short answer is it should be a decentralized autonomous organization. So instead of a corporation, it's a DAO. So like a DAO is not a radical idea. It's just kind of a flattened entity that does things using voting and using kind of more democratized processes than it would if there was a CEO with management team and everyone kind of has individual decision-making authority based on your hierarchy. This, in theory, we should make decisions as an organization based on something that is a little bit more democratic, even if democratic is just how much money you invest, right? And so that is how a DAO technically works. An investment DAO, I think, is the best use case for DAOs. It's the easiest, right? You deploy capital. There's a lot of other things that are happening in the DAO space that are very, very interesting. But investment DAOs to me are like the simplest and purest form of a DAO, right? You participate in this ecosystem. You have a token economy. You vote based on your token holdings, and you make decisions based on your token holdings. And so for the utopia of investment DAOs is like everyone invests in the DAO. you bring deals together, you look at deals together, you vote on deals together, and you automatically do the deals as the vote passes. And then there's like thresholds for that. There's governance for that. I will say, that's what I thought it was at the beginning. And then when we looked into it, oh, it's so much more complicated than that. And you can thank the SEC and all the like lovely laws in the US, which I think are there for a very good reason. But you have to navigate around some of these things. So it's like most investment DAOs are not that kind of pure form of DAO. You have kind of two categories. One I would call like investment clubs, which look a lot more like angel investing or crowdfunding. And there are some things that you can't do there that weren't appropriate for our group. So like, for example, in order to comply with the 1930s, Investment Advisor Act, you can't technically do diligence together, right? So if you and I are a member of the same investment club, we have to make our own independent decisions, do our own independent research. Because if I said, hey, Alana, like, I really like this deal and here's why, here's some like research that I did on it, I would be violating, the Investment Advisor Act, and I'd be providing investment advice, and you can go to jail for that type of stuff. So can't do that. We set up a structure. So you have the investment clubs, which are great. Again, more akin to kind of angel groups, and then you have this kind of second generation of investment DAOs, of which we are one at VC3, which is more like a traditional fund, which deploys capital on behalf of a DAO. So the DAO is the community. And then I think you get a lot of variation in what the DAO does and how much decision-making power the DAO has, depending on the DAO. Sometimes you have like a fund that is totally separate, and maybe they like get inspiration from the DAO, but they're not really like, the DAO's not voting on anything. They're not like, there's not really a formalized process. We have set it up in kind of a tricky way, like not tricky, but like, it's been difficult to navigate, but we're very careful about how we do this. We care very deeply about compliance and making sure things work. But we do have several voting stages along the way for our DAO members to vote on deals. So our DAO members submit deals. We kind of vote on the deals at various stages in various ways. We do full-scale due diligence on the fund side, and then we do a final vote on the DAO side. We also have a final vote on the fund side. So there's like multiple steps. It got very, very complicated, but like it sounds complicated, and it is, but we do it in generally 2 to 3 weeks. We also have an active co-investment group. So almost the interesting thing about our DAO is we're not just a bunch of random individuals that are deploying capital. Almost everyone in our DAO, we have now 175 VCs in 28 countries around the world, who all are generally attached to their own fund. And so they're interested in co-investing with us. So we'll do a deal, we'll write a small check, and usually several of our members will also be interested in writing checks. And so they're kind of leveraging our diligence, leveraging our community and deal flow in order to do those deals. So I will say that was a long-winded explanation, but generally what an investment DAO does is it decentralizes the deployment of capital in a way that more people are making decisions, more people are providing insight and intelligence and influence, and more people hopefully can help create a better outcome.
I think that was an incredibly great explanation of what you've been building. And I know I've learned so much from you, of even just seeing like the partnership deck and how you've structured the voting process and token allocations based on your committed capital to the fund. And then also, the ability to use those tokens to be a co-investor or to get additional allocation. Are there other ways that the tokens can be spent, for example, or used, other than, sort of maybe a voting majority or, percentage of voting, power, or, how are the tokens in the DAO used?
Yep. So I think that, again, there's kind of current state and there's like the ideal state. And I think we're trying to move to the ideal state. Current state is it's really kind of mostly used for voting. I think the ideal state, and we're kind of phasing out some of these things, is, can you stake tokens on a deal, right? So if I really like a deal, instead of like, the fund is actually investing, but if I really like a deal, can I stake my tokens on the deal? So I'm like really giving some real credibility to the deal. And maybe there's a way to earn some yield on that. We're working through what that actually looks like. So, like, it means it's much more complicated than it sounds, but that type of thing. We also have what is a pretty incredible expert network. So people are asking for help and support and feedback all along the way. One of the easiest use cases that we've just started doing is we give all of our founders tokens. So not the investors necessarily, but we add all of the portfolio companies that we invest in. We give all the founders tokens. We add them to the DAO, and so they use those to post bounties. to ask for support. So again, most VCs say they help. Sometimes they help, sometimes they don't. But if a founder can say like, hey, I have like, I'm hiring a VP of finance. This is a really important role for this. Here's like 1,000 tokens that you gave me, by the way. Like it's not anything that they didn't it's like a net cost for them. They're posting that, and then their people are in theory incentivized to help them more than they would otherwise because they immediately get those tokens. And so there's things like that. There's a bunch of other things we're kind of experimenting with, but I think that's what will make this work. If there's a real token economy where you're not just earning tokens, you're spending them and earning them. That's what eventually makes this work. I will say we're not there yet. I don't think any DAOs are really there yet, but we're moving in the right direction, I think.
Absolutely. And it takes experimentation, right? So I love the experiments that you're running. What do you think has been the most exciting thing you've learned from the experimentation you have been doing that you would want others to know?
So I think it's just the power of community, right? I think, this is a lot of work. And some days I'm like, is this really worth it? Like, is it like, why don't we just do a normal venture fund? Why did I do this crazy thing? And then something will happen. And there's some like small examples, like, where you just go, this is really powerful. Like we're hosting our annual offsite, and we've turned it into a investment DAO summit in Puerto Rico. And we announced it. We said we're doing this, and within 30 minutes, people were like, "That's great. Here's a sponsor that just committed $100,000. I happen to be talking to them at lunch. Here's 3 people in Puerto Rico that you absolutely need to invite. Here's 20 other things. Like the community is very powerful, and especially when you have a good community that's connected, that is motivated, and that is excited about what you're doing. It's so much more interesting than just working in a fund of 5 or 10 people.
I love it. It's really forward thinking. And to your point of unlocking the powers of networks and how that can only happen when, the value is shared and the decision-making responsibility and co-creation is shared. And so the experiments to figure out how to best do that and be compliant is just really important, and takes, leading thinkers to put it together. Is there a person or a company in the space that's really inspiring you that you think is doing this really well or trying really interesting new things, and why?
It's a great question. So I really like the guys at Orange DAO and Origami. So we were one of their first partners. They were also like when we were kind of scrambling around to test every DAO product and every tool out there. And Origami launched, which is the Y Combinator DAO, Orange DAO launched, which is the Y Combinator DAO, and then they spun out Origami, which is a DAO tooling company, which we are the first customer of, and we made an investment in them. They were thinking about it in a different way. And they were thinking about like, how do you do sophisticated investment DAOs? And that was right. We were like, how do we do professional VC on a DAO, not an angel group? And so I think I really like the way they're thinking about it. They're doing some things incredibly well, like all DAOs, some things they're still working on, but they're also creating this really interesting community of other investment DAOs. So we're all on a Discord channel, and it's like, we kind of learn from each other. And so it's almost like a community of other DAO communities, which is kind of cool. So there's a lot of people doing cool stuff in the space, but I think what I'm trying to find is like, who are the like very serious people with real like long-term intentions behind this. And I think they've done a pretty good job of building that community.
Absolutely. And I think it really goes to say a lot about you both in having these really well-established communities behind your investment DAO. So like Kauffman Fellows, as you mentioned, Orange DAO with YC. So, really entrenched investor communities that are now innovating on that already really foundational model. For those of people listening who are thinking about starting an investment DAO, what advice would you give to them, someone getting started?
Yeah, so almost exactly what you're saying here with the community. Like, I think the hardest part is to build the community. So I would start with a community. So whatever community you're involved in, build that community first. And that can be very offline, right? Like with Kauffman, we're all on WhatsApp channels. Like, it's not particularly tech enabled. And but we had this really strong community. And I think I've seen a lot of very interesting like white papers and pitches of other DAOs that have really great ideas on how to run the DAO or what they're doing differently or what the mission is. But then they have to build the community. And I just think I would encourage you to like focus on the community first and then build the DAO around the community versus the response. It's not like this is a weird space. It's hard. Like if you go, if I build it, they will come. It's probably going to be a lot harder than if you have a community that knows you, that's willing to kind of experiment with you, that's willing to like go through some, like, I don't know how many complaints I get about Discord every day, but a lot. Like, it's not like DAO tooling is not and that's not even really DAO tooling. That's just Web3, communication channels. But like the tools aren't good right now, and like things don't work. And so you have to start with a community that cares about the thing, not the process of being a DAO at the beginning.
Absolutely. Yeah. Some of the best examples I've been seeing are really groups of people that are already connected for some common bond, right? Like, so it might be ex Airbnb or Uber employees who are all seeing similar deal flow, and then they want to bond together, or like SpaceX, or wherever, and they're trying to diversify the kinds of things that they're getting access to in the types of industries. So you're at SpaceX, you want to kind of move into consumer or something like that. And how to actually form, some critical mass in networks to get more access to those opportunities, or just even like-minded groups. We've seen a lot of growth in, women who are like operators and executives looking to try to get on cap tables and really truly, coming together in a space. We've done that a lot with Eve as well. So I love that advice, that it's just, know your community, know the reason you're coming together, and then use the tools that are at your disposal to try to make that process more equitable, more network driven, more transparent, whatever, you think the benefits outweigh the costs of, to your point, some really early experimental ways of collaborating. Well, this has been such an amazing, insightful interview. I would love to share with the people listening, how can we keep in touch with you and also VC3 and the other projects you have going on to follow as you evolve and as you learn?
Yeah, absolutely. So feel free to follow me or VC3 on Twitter. It's Jules E. Miller, or VC3 DAO on all the social media channels. I think we're pretty consistent about those things. Reach out to me on LinkedIn, connect there. And I think we can still sign up for our newsletter on the VC3 DAO website, which is vc3dao.xyz.
Perfect. And what kind of deals do you guys look for? Just so anyone listening looking for investment can know.
Sure. We do all Web3 deals, generally early stage. The difference, though, and this makes it a little tricky, is we don't generally do inbound leads, meaning someone in our member generally sponsors the deal. So you kind of have to find one of our members who will sponsor and advocate for the deal and push it through. So gotta hustle.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Jules. We'll definitely be following along and can't wait to see how all of these experiments unfold. Thanks so much.